Centered in the heart of Florida's 20 judicial circuits, the Court of the 10th Judicial Circuit serves Hardy, Highlands, and Polk counties. The Tri-County area has diverse localities ranging from urbanized population centers to profoundly rural areas. 28 circuit judges and 12 county court judges serve a population of approximately 728,612 people in a 3,676 square mile area. Now, coming up on Polk Place, we'll hear about their efforts to keep you safe while reopening during the COVID pandemic. Welcome to Polk Place. I'm Brian Lacey, and joining us in studio, a first-timer on Polk Place, the Public Information Officer from the 10th Judicial Circuit, Tracy Skeen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, kind of strange times we're going through, and
Yes.
and the court, just like the United States Marine Corps, adapting, overcoming,
Yes.
and conquering.
Yes, fabulously so.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit. The pandemic has really interrupted the court proceedings because people are ordered to stay home. When did our court proceedings get interrupted as a result of the pandemic?
Okay, so the court began operating under emergency operations on March 13th. That is when the Florida Supreme Court entered their first administrative order regarding the coronavirus pandemic, that at that point was just beginning to become an issue in Florida. And on March 19th, our local emergency order was enacted, and that is where we begin operating in the court operation of Phase 1, which is when only essential or critical court proceedings were allowed to occur in person. And that is when we had to change to more of electronic format and find other ways for people to be able to appear without having to appear in person, unless it was for those specific hearings that you have to be able to appear in person.
Now, we've heard the term phases. We're currently in Phase 1, and coming up we've got 2 and 3. Is that right?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about how those phases are going to go in effect and what they're going to look like.
Okay, so the Florida Supreme Court defined 4 phases of court operations. And Phase 1 of court operations, which is what we went into on March 19th, is implemented when in-person contact is inadvisable, court facilities are effectively closed to the public, and in-person proceedings at that point are rare, other than those deemed mandatory for critical and essential court proceedings. Phase 2 is implemented when limited in-person contact is authorized for certain purposes and or requires the use of protective measures. And that is the phase that we just entered into yesterday, August 25th. Our chief judge has transitioned us to begin in Phase 2, which we are relieved about.
Have our courts been closed since March while we're in Phase 1? And if not, how have the courts been able to be open if people haven't been allowed to come in?
Well, actually, our courts have been, the buildings have been closed to the public with exceptions, but the courts have been open and they've been running. And we have been able to do that with the help of virtual video conferencing and telephonic appearances. And so pretty much all of the hearings that are not deemed essential and critical have been done virtually by appearing by video, or you can call in and use a conference line ID and you enter into the virtual courtrooms that way. And basically, anyone who needs to appear in their court proceeding that hasn't been deemed to be an in-person hearing, they would simply go to our website, they would click on the link that takes them to the virtual courtroom links, and then they would choose the link for their particular court proceeding, and through that link is where they would either obtain entry through the virtual court doorway, or they would get the information for the that includes the telephone number and the conference line ID.
Now, what criteria does the state use for the resumption of, say, jury trials?
Well, the criteria is actually set forth by the Florida Supreme Court, and all of the circuits in our state use that criteria that they've established. And essentially, jury selection and jury trial proceedings shall remain suspended until 30 days after the chief judge of a judicial circuit has determined that either their entire circuit or maybe only one or two counties within their circuit is able to transition to phase two. So there are 20 circuits in the state of Florida, and that means that each may resume jury trials at different times. It just depends on the decision of their chief judge to transition them into stage two. That is determined by the requirements and benchmarks that the Florida Supreme Court established that include the two main ones that it includes would be that the community health must be improving, and then there must be safety and health screening protocols in place before you're able to make that transition into phase two.
When can the residents expect a summons for jury duty?
Well, I can't say a certain date that will occur, but we know that a jury trial must not take place until 30 days after August 25th, let's use here in Polk County.
Okay.
So August 25th was the day we started transitioning into phase two. So 30 days out from there basically would allow us to start recommence our jury trials in October. The Polk County clerk sends summonses out about 4 weeks in advance. So if the trials are recommencing in October and they send those summonses out 4 weeks in advance, Polk citizens may expect to see their summonses in September. They'll probably begin to start receiving them in September.
What steps are being taken to make sure that jurors are safe?
Well, that's a good question. Well, okay, so in addition to the steps that were set forth by the Florida Supreme Court, our trial court administrator, Nick Sadzina, actually invited the director of Polk Health to tour our Bartow courthouse across the street. And as a result of that tour, they were able to implement, it was the recommendation of the director of Polk Health to also implement social distancing requirements as they are recommended by the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And so we have also implemented those measures. And all of the measures that are being implemented in all of our courthouses throughout our entire circuit are actually included in and outlined in a message from our Chief Judge Ellen Masters. She actually does that in a video that you may be familiar with that is currently posted on our website. And it includes all the screening measures that all persons entering the courthouse will be required to complete prior to being able to enter the courthouse. And similar protocols have been implemented for the building partners as well, which would be like the state attorney's office, the public defender's office, clerk's office. And they include several different elements. Essentially, when potential jurors arrive, they can expect a temperature check. They can expect to be asked health screening questions to determine whether or not they are allowed to enter the building. And they're going to be advised that they must adhere to the requirement that a face mask must be worn at all times when people are moving inside the courthouses rather. It applies to every courthouse in our circuit. There are also cleaning protocols and sanitation protocols that have been put into place and that are required in every building in our circuit, every courthouse, and those are supervised by our trial court administrator, Nick Sadzina. And in further effort to implement and enforce social distancing, when people come into the courthouse, they're going to notice that there is not as much furniture in the public areas. A lot of that has been relocated and repositioned to
no place to gather.
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah,
And the
same thing happened in our lobby.
Same exact thing.
I didn't realize how big our lobby was until
until you see all the chairs and things spaced out, and you see the sign, and you're like, wow, you cannot, this is a huge cavernous area. So yes, that's happening over in the courthouse too, and we have signs and everything. It's really easy. It's going to be easy for people to come in and fall right into the protocols that we've set up.
We've heard virtual court. What are the chances that there could be a virtual jury?
Well, okay, so.
And by virtual, meaning people attend via telephone, Skype, something along that lines.
Right.
We're just going to make up random people.
Right. There's going to be pretend jurors. No, that would never happen. Actually, in June, there was a pilot program authorized by the Florida Supreme Court. It was a project that they authorized to identify and evaluate issues relating to the conduct of civil jury trials. Through remote means, not criminal, just the civil. And it was not, we didn't participate in that. It wasn't enacted here, but what we were able to do was we were able to observe a lot of the stuff online through live streams that they experienced while doing it. So we were able to learn a lot through their experiences. And the Florida Supreme Court also established a work group to study the possibility of conducting civil but not criminal jury trials in the future. However, right now, like we said, it's just a project and a work group, and they hopefully will be moving forward with that in the future if it looks viable.
Now, what's the criteria that the court uses to determine essential or critical proceedings?
Okay, so these two types of hearings are similar in that they both must take place. These are crucial hearings, is what I would describe them as, and they're different, but they have that common element. Essential proceedings are defined by the Florida Supreme Court to include hearings like first appearance, criminal arraignments, hearings on motions to set or modify monetary bail for individuals in custody, different types of juvenile hearings, dependency shelter hearings or delinquency detention hearings, hearings that are where time is of the essence. You know what I mean? And and there's many other hearings that fall under the essential hearings umbrella. I touched on a few of them, but that's not an exhaustive list. Whereas the critical proceedings are defined by the Supreme Court as those being related to the state of emergency that you're currently in, or the public health emergency, and they include hearings in relation to like violations of quarantine or isolation, violations of orders to limit travel, violations of orders to close public or private buildings, violations of like people who refuse to follow the enforcement of a curfew.
These are strange new times that we are in, Tracy, and the 10th Judicial Circuit is changing with the times.
Yes, sir. Yeah, gratefully, yes.
Well, listen, thank you for coming in and clarifying everything with us, and come back and see us again soon with the next update.
Thank you. I would love to.
Due to the statewide emergence of the COVID-19 in March of this year, the 10th Judicial Circuit were faced with the directive from the Florida Supreme Court mandating that in-person court proceedings had to be significantly reduced to minimize the risk of spreading COVID-19. To adhere to this directive and still keep our courts open and accessible, they were complied to move court proceedings from a live platform to one that instead operated online using digital technology. In preparation for more in-person proceedings, such as jury trials, to recommence, the following protective measures are currently being implemented and are continually assessed to update to minimize health risks to any and all persons who must personally appear at the courthouse. All 10th Judicial Circuit courthouses and facilities are subject to rigorous cleaning schedules, sanitation protocols as applicable. All courthouse visitors are screened prior to being allowed to pass through a main entrance of the courthouse and will be required to undergo a temperature check. Multiple signs regarding COVID-19 related rules and restrictions, social distancing instructions, and preventable tips are prominently displayed throughout all courthouses and are strictly enforced. Now, if you need more information on the 10th Judicial Circuit reopening, you can look them up on the web at www.jud10.flcourts.org.